Well, welcome. My name is Paul Murphy. This is my friend Gerry Smith. We meet on Tuesdays, the Marine Corps meeting over in Durham. And all the older fellows have some nice stories. They know all the facts, and it's great that Gerry's knows half the people that are in the room right here. What his story is going to be about, he's going to take you from his UNH days, and then he's going to walk you through his military career, which had a lot of, shall we say, ups and downs, but if you have any questions, you can hold them to the end, and he'll definitely have an answer for you. So, welcome. Thank you for coming, too.
Thanks for the invitation, Paul, to speak, and for inviting me and getting the word out and letting some people suffer for a while. I don't have any of Doc's medicine with me that makes tonic easier, but we'll go where we are. Before I start, I'd like to have my family stand up, because they don't know it yet, but they're going to be part of the program. My daughter, Sue, daughter-in-law Sue, daughter-in-law Heather, son. Oh. Where's your, oh, that's good.
We're everywhere.
Just so that you won't feel embarrassed or anything, I'm blind on either side like this, and I had a stroke about 8-10 months ago, so bear with me if I make some mistakes or if I have trouble remembering, because if you've been through it, it's an experience. I'm going to give a very brief resume of getting into this, my real topic. 1941, Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. 1942, I enlisted in the reserves. 1943, I went into the service. 1944, I graduated with a pilot's wings. 1944, overseas. And basically the training programs all those ways was in 2-month units. And you've read about them a lot of other places, and my experiences on those graduation things is about the same as everybody's else. 1944, went overseas, got overseas in late July. 1945, November 5th, 1944, German fighter plane and our plane tangled, and he won, and we shot down. 2 of the boys never made it out of the plane. I was immediately taken to prisoner of war because the harness that you have on for a parachute, you have to have 2 hands to unhook it. And in this hand, everything from here to here was right down to bare bone, so the median and the ulnar nerve were completely shot away. So I had no use for my left hand, and if you go and do this, the buckle just kept going around like this. I was picked up by the Italians. I was picked up by the Germans, I mean, and I at that point thought that I was going to be killed by the Italians, because they came at me with pitchforks, hoes, rakes, clubs, anything they could, and the Nazis formed a circle around me and protected me, I thought. Went to a field hospital right there in the town. It was over a little town up in the Alps by the name of Rovereto, Italy, right at the northern end of the Brenner Pass. Our group had not seen any fighters since July of 1944, and this was November, and we were jumped with by fighters. And in my report, when I finally filled one out, they wanted to know how many fighters there were. And I told them 50. And they said everybody else said was only 15 to 20. I said, well, then they must have come in twice, because I and so they took me right down to a field hospital. They debrided my arm, and at that time The Germans didn't have any ether, they used chloroform. They didn't have any soluble sulfur, they only had sulfur powder, and they only had paper dressing. And they gave me a good treatment. I expected to wake up from the operating table with my left arm cut off up about here. And instead of that, I was in a butterfly cast like this. And as soon as dark came, this was around noontime, when dark came, they shipped us down to the railroad station. And lo and behold, we stayed down there until about midnight. And come to find out, a bunch of bastards from the United States had bombed the railroad yard there, and their trains didn't run. And I didn't tell them that we were sitting on time bombs, because when they drop their bombs, they don't let them all go off at once. They have one go off here and one time here, so that they won't come in to start repairing until they're sure all the bombs have gone off. It's just a delaying tactic. So, but eventually, about a week later, they took us up to a town by the name of Merano, M-E-R-A-N-O. And that was a recreation resort, and all of the hotels but one, there was about 100 hotels in town, all but one had been turned into temporary hospitals. And I was sent to one of those. They treated me like every other soldier that was there, the Germans, the Italians. I got the same food. The only thing that I didn't get was on Christmas Day and celebration days, if they got 2 shots of schnapps, I got 1. If they got 10 cigarettes, I got 5. If they got 4 apples, I got 2. But I felt pretty lucky, and I got exactly the same food as they did. I had the same kind of clothes, and to the best of my knowledge, I was never intentionally hurt. Now, I don't know. I'd like to say right here, every individual, every prisoner of war story is individual, and there's no way to compare it with anybody's else. And one good thing about it is we can lie a little, and there was nobody there to check out on us. I was in Merano until mid-February, from mid-November to mid-February, and by that time, they'd taken off my cast. This had healed over with a very, very skin, and you can see the injured skin complex, and that's all there was over it, but it was safe as far as infection went. And I was shipped away, POW prison camp in Spital, Austria. It's over near Villach. Oh, it was a place over there in Hungary, in Austria, that they had the Winter Olympics a while back. And we were maybe 60 miles east or west of there. So I was there about a week or 10 days, and fortunately I was there and put in with some of the prisoners that were taken in El Alamein, the first El Alamein, and they were professionals. And the thing that struck me was, we got in there at mid-afternoon. I went in and we were sitting down visiting, given where we were from and everything, and the British and the British subjects, come hell or high water, they had their tea every morning at 10 and every afternoon at 3. And we were talking, and they got out some paraphernalia, and I didn't know what it was. They plugged it in the electric outlet, and lo and behold, there was a hot water heater. And some of you people in here are young enough to remember the old bottle warmers that we had, that you put it in a little round amp, put a little salt and water and plug it in. Well, that's what this was, only it was a metal can with 2 pieces of metal attached to wire. And when everybody did it, you can imagine what happened. The lights kept getting dim, and then they'd come around and try to find them. And as soon as, I don't know, but what the code was, how they knew. But they said the guards are coming down to inspect. And before they could get from the guard house into the compound, that thing was all taken care of. They had a piece of wood about that long. It was cut out. Help came, shelf back there. Everything went in there. Little dirt went over the crack. The chair went back over that. And they put me in the chair. The guards came right in. They said, "Where's the hot water heater?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I haven't seen any water heater. I said, "I just barely got here." I said, "Yeah, I don't know where they are." They hunted and hunted and hunted. They finally left. 15 minutes after they left, we were drinking hot tea. And that was the Yankee and the POW ingenuity. Why weren't they? I asked them why they weren't out working, and they said they sabotaged everything. And we sometimes don't say the nicest things, but they said the best thing in the world to stop an engine is to put just a little urine in it over a period of time. They said it'll keep working, but about a month, 6 weeks down the road it stopped, but you haven't been around it for a long while, so you couldn't do it. It was sure to accomplish the same thing. So that was the kind of people you're working with that was always nudging, but never just keeping under the scope. All right, we stayed at Spital for about 10 days, 2 weeks, and then they took 5 prisoners and 3 guards and started us from Spital up to Dulag Luft. And Dulag Luft was an interrogation center for air personnel about 20 miles north of Frankfurt on Maine. I tell you, that first night we traveled by ox cart, we traveled by boat, we traveled by train, we traveled by truck, and we traveled with Shanks Mail. We walked. And from mid-February until the 28th, I think it was, of March, the group of us was on the march. So we went through Würzburg, which was a bombed out city, a retaliation city for the V2, V1s, V2s, and the foundation was still so hot 10 days later that you couldn't even win the solos. It was, I say, devastated. There wasn't anything standing. And we went up as far as Frankfurt on Maine, got up there, they said the Americans were 4 days out. They turned us around, put us on a train, and headed us back to Nuremberg. We left, and we hadn't been out of the station more than 30 minutes when the train pulled into a big gully, and this bundle in the railroad track with that, and there was some 47s flying around, P-47 ours flying around up there. And I said to the under officer in charge of it, I said, "They're going straight for train." And he said, "Schmitty, you are scared." I said, "Yeah, I am." In the military, we had our own military organization, just the same as you do in any military post. The senior officer is automatically the commanding officer. And I outranked any of the other people with me, so I said, "We're getting off." And the guards followed us off. They didn't lead, they followed. But they didn't have any trouble, because as soon as the strafing was over, we were looking them up, because that was our only security. We got on, walked for a while, and we were going through I think it was the main river, I'm not sure, but it was a river, nice river, had some river boats on it that apparently had been firing at the 47s, and we were going along a nice open field, river on one side, nice field, good road, no noise or anything, and all of a sudden the first thing we heard was rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Looked up, P-47 had gone over there, picked up a lot of speed, and he was coasting up over a hill to kiss, and when he got where he could get at those riverboats, he started firing. And you could see the dust coming right towards you. Got about as far as this front row and they stopped. He started there and he got the riverboats down there. If he hadn't taken his thumb off, I wouldn't be talking to you. And after that, the under officer said, in charge of it said, the German officer said, Schmitty, we walk at night. we sleep at night. No, walk at night, that's right. And we'll sleep in the daytime in the tunnel. We got onto another train, lo and behold, that one was straight. And if you've been in Europe, you know that their railroad cars have a walkway down one side and seats on the other. It's not the wide aisles that we have here. And after the strafing was over, we went back and looked, and every one of us wonders how we ever got out that window. Even with one hand, I could find out that I could go through a window that high, about that far off the ground, and it didn't take long. So, when we got to Nuremberg, it was Frankfurt, they put us in, well, it was in Frankfurt, they put us in the railroad yard all day. Not a nice place to be, because I looked to see what the outside of the station was as we walked in, and I didn't want to sit in that station all day in case the big boys came over and gave us some few bomb shots. So when we got to Nuremberg, they'd assigned us a tent, and the tent was very, very dark. And I was going in, and all of a sudden, a fellow says, I heard a voice say, Smitty, Gerry. I didn't see anybody I know. Gerry. I didn't see anybody I know. I kept walking, and by a Polish soldier walked out. I don't know anybody from Poland. When he got in a little closer so I could see him, Clayton J. Smith. He and I stood side by side for 3 months down in Barksdale, Peel Street, Fort Lee, in a B-26 spot. He and I had gone overseas at the same time, and he'd been in quite a while. And so we worked in groups while we were prisoners of war. They call it a combine. And I asked if I could join his combine, and they voted and went in, and I traveled with him the rest of the war. Now, let's back up just a whisker. I made a deal with my kids that they don't know about. I told them I'd take them to Italy if they'd take answers and questions. So they're here tonight, and we retraced pretty much my POW trip over there. And after we get through, if you want to ask them questions, that's why I had them stand up. You can ask him questions because they just went through where I was pretty much most of the way. After we got to Nuremberg, we got there on a Thursday, I think it was, and that year, Easter Sunday, was the 1st of April. And we had a nice Easter sunrise service. It was a red-headed padre from England that had the service. And as we got back to the tent, they said, be prepared to leave on a 15-minute notice. Well, it didn't take very long to wrap up what you had, because all you had was, if you were lucky, you had an extra coat. You tied the sleeves up, you made the knapsack out of it, put it over your shoulders, and you were ready to go. We left, our group left on the 1st of April. 10 days later, we were down in Moosburg, which is about 25 miles northeast of Munich. And we arrived there on about the 10th of April. Patton's Third Army liberated us on the 29th of April. I was back in the military on the 5th of May. I was back home the 31st of, back in this country on the 31st of May. landed at Long Island, what is now Hofstra University, Mitchell Field at the time. And they sorted us out and shipped us, and they shipped me up to Framingham, Mass, which was Cushing General Hospital, and Cushing was a noted nerve surgeon. That's why, and they had a lot of nerve surgery there, and a lot of reconstructive surgery, as naturally. And then I was there. They closed Cushing down, and I was transferred to Harrowing down in Highland, New York Harbor.
Long Island?
What?
Long Island?
No.
Staten.
What?
Staten Island?
Staten Island?
No, I'll come back. Doesn't make any difference. It's right just outside of New York City. And I was discharged from there in January of '47. So now let's go back a little bit. Training was in 2 months, simple months, and it was very, very good. And you were checked by 2 different pilots at every station before they moved you on. Everybody, no, not everybody, I shouldn't say that, but most of the pilots wanted to be fighter pilots. Why?
It's
They didn't want 5 or 6 other men's lives depending on them. They were willing to fight for themselves, but they didn't want to have somebody else. And as I told you, we lost 2 boys when we were shot down. Interesting. When we were flying, we were stationed in Sardinia for a while, in the Mediterranean. The targets got so far away for the B-26 that they moved us up to Corsica. And anybody in here know Gerry Chase?
Yep.
Anybody in here know Gerry Chase? Well, Jerry's outfit had moved out so we could move in. P-47s moved out, and they put B-26s on the same landing strip. We went from a 10,000 foot, 6 runways side by side in Sardinia to 1 runway, a little under 6,000 feet long, with a hump in the middle of it, so if you put a B-26 on either end, and you got up there, you couldn't see each other. Now that was, and when we got there, they took out the machine guns, they took out the ammunition, they took out everything they could, and we only went with about half tank of gas. Well, missions got a little farther, so a little more gasoline went in. Then one of the other groups saw fighter planes, so back in went the armament. They didn't lengthen the runway any. And the runway was a lot like this is here. It's a good place to demonstrate it. Only was you started here and you came up against now. Right here, this went over to a big drop off. And every time a plane took off, you were watching it, you counted to 10. And if he hadn't shown up very shortly after that, you know that he wasn't going to make it. Because he'd go, and what they really did, they'd mush. They'd go off the cat, go down the cat, pick up speed, and then gradually come back up. And every time we rendezvoused, you know, Napoleon's enthusiast, we organized our flight to go into bomb right over Elba, the Isle of Elba. So we got quite a lot of history too. Then, the day we were, the day I was shot down was interesting. The night before, we were in a tent, and I had phoned with this gentleman several times, and we were, when they moved us up to Corsica, we got into the same tent, and his name was Jim Logston, and he checked me out as a first pilot. Nobody flies as a pilot until they've had at least 5 missions, so that they know what basically what's going on, and it gives them a little experience. So the CO came in and he said, I can't ask you to fly tomorrow because you're on orders to go to Rome for rest camp. Ooh. But he said, I'm a crew short. And he said, we've got this milk run tomorrow that up to Italy, and he said, you'll be back before the plane leaves for Rome if you want to fly. But he said, I'm not asking you, I can't. And the pilot looked at me and I looked at him, and he shook his head, and I said, yeah, if we can get one more mission then, we'll make it that much closer to getting home. So that mission led us into quite a detour. And we didn't see anything unusual until we got a little ways off the coast, and then one plane picked us up, and it stayed out of range, so we could shoot at it, but it was always out of range. And what it was, we called it a bandit, and he was following us and calling ahead and telling us how many bombers, elevation, direction, airspeed, all the things that they needed to know. So we got attacked, and well, first of all, we flew in formations of 9. Was 3 here, and then 3 more like that with the lead ship underneath the tail of this, so it came down like this. And when we went over a bomb run, the 2 inside people dropped down and came out like this, and then the whole thing closed like this to give us the most firepower against the fighters. And so we'd gone into the bombing formation, and we were not only attacked with fighters, we were attacked with shrapnel from ACAC guns, and those German 88, if any of you in the service know what they were, probably the best piece of artillery built in World War II. Accurate, fast, and lethal. But we got jumped by an ME-109, and the tail gunner was badly injured, so our boys up back went back and got him and put a chute on and dragged him up by a window. And then we got a hit, and the pedestal was just about like this much here for your throttle and your mixture control valves and prop control valves and all that. And the co-pilot's job is to sit with his hand on the mixture control valve, because that controls the gasoline flowing to the engine. So if you get hit in an engine, you cut it back, hopefully before it catches on fire. So my hand was like that, and this whole pedestal disappeared. It was gone. And the pilot kept a log that he kept hidden in his long coat, and when they read it after the war, when he got home, it says, when I could look up and see the sky, when I could look down and see the land, when I could look out the right and there was no engine, I knew we had to leave the ship. So I jumped, and to get out of a B-26, how long have I been talking? I'm programmed for 50 minutes.
30. You're having, not even half fun.
After teaching RA 32 years, that comes just about right.
The bell rings at 50 minutes. The bell rings at 50 minutes.
Okay, well, somebody ring a bell. Anyway, in order for me to get out, the nose wheel comes up like this and closes off an opening about that wide. And then they put plywood over it when you're flying or we're moving around, so that you can not go down in and break a leg or something. So the back is smooth like that. You pull the doors back like this while you go over a target, but in the shooting and everything, the door had jiggles a little bit, and it was about that wide. And I had on what they call a seat chute. It's about that thick, about that square, and you carry. The pilot and the co-pilot wore one all the time. The engineer, the And the people that moved around the plane, because that was what they had to do, they had a harness, then they had a little parachute about that big around, about that long, and they just did like this, and it snapped right on to the front of them. No, I beg your pardon, it comes like this. The hooks come on and catch it. Well, I weighed about 180, and that seat chute, and my 180, just a little too big for the door. So the bombardier, a smaller version, had to get out. But in order for him to get out, my seat had to slide back like this because the tunnel that went down to where the bombardier sat had rudder controls, no brakes, and they just folded back like this, so there was a clear little tunnel for him to get back in. And I got down as far as I could go, and he just jumped on my chute with this and literally drove me down through the escape hatch. You may have heard it, that your life kind of goes by you fast just when you're in real danger. I could almost sworn I saw a newsreel. My family, friends, and everything. And I just got through reading about Captain Peters, and he said that at one place he said the same thing, which kind of interested me. Well, anyway, I landed on the ground, and as I said, I couldn't unhook my parachute, so they got me before I could do that. And as they formed a ring around me, the civilians wanted something. And even under a little stress, I think you can have a little fun. They wanted something, and the only thing I could think of that I could give them was sea marker. And you have your Mae West, then you have a little package of sea marker on it that's supposed to shine in the water, so if they're looking for you, they can see it. And I told them it was soap. I laughed a few times when I wondered what they looked like when they tried to wash with it. And we went back 12, in year 12, and I took my children and we retraced the step. Probably the biggest surprise of my life was the fact that I'd been wrong since 1944. The real Italians disliked the Nazis more than we did, because they lived under them. They said, absolutely, if we'd had half a chance, we would have taken you into the mountains, we would have taken care of you, we'd gotten you back to your life. And that just, and I said, well, I explained the situation. I said, we don't blame you for feeling the way you did, that they were going to kill you and everything. But he said, every family basically in the area was represented in that group that came to, quote, kill you, because we wanted to make them believe that we were with them. Because otherwise, life was not good. So, and it made perfect sense in retrospect, but not when you were standing there seeing them come out. The other thing is that, I've got a complete metal that. Oh. Now I'm going to call on my kids one at a time. Is there anything, one thing special that you learned on the trip? Good. Please. One thing you learned on the trip.
I wasn't there.
Probably that my dad didn't even start talking about this until you wrote that first book in the 90s, I believe, right? And I was born in 1956. So that gives you an idea of just how many years I'd had a dad and I had no idea what this was all about. And when he finally shared his book, and things began to progress, we had this opportunity to go to Italy. I can honestly tell you, I had no idea what he had truly experienced. What was on paper was nothing like what we got to see and touch and feel and smell when we actually got into that area of the Alps up near the Brenta Pass. We actually got to go to the site of the plane crash. We actually found fragments of the plane because of the Italian hosts that had worked with us. So we actually, for the first time, could sense some of what Dad had gone through. We'll never experience it the way he did. But for me, I acquired a whole new appreciation, not only for Dad, because he is a hero to me, but for all the veterans in World War II and what they did for us. And I mean, it's just, it was huge.
Thank you, Gordon. Heather?
Very well said.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I actually had a question for Gordon. Let's see if I have it right. When you went to the site, did someone come out to see you, Dad? Was
Yeah, a
there?
lot of them did.
Oh,
Wasn't he
Oh.
there?
In terms of,
Giuseppe.
Wasn't it someone that was at the?
Giuseppe.
Yeah.
yes, I mean, the whole reason, well, that's a story in itself, and I ran out of my dad's lecture. But there was, the whole reason we had this opportunity to go back to Europe in the first place was, I'm just gonna stand up, makes it a little easier, was that there were some young boys who were out playing soccer as 12-year-olds. And they saw this whole air fight and saw 2 different planes get shot down. One of them became a doctor, but over the years he wanted desperately to find the men, the families of these people on the planes. And eventually got in touch with the son of the pilot that was on Dad's plane. So this is something this guy had chased for almost 60 years. And when we went to Italy, they became hosts and they took us around. And that's how we found out about the plane. But what was really interesting is the guy who'd seen Dad's plane shot down was a shepherd. He was a goat herder. And we actually met Giuseppe.
He was 12 at the time.
He was 12 at the time as well. And he actually went with us up to the mountain at one point in time, showed us around, and kept talking about Dad as my American hero. He's my American hero. And there's actually a book up here with some pictures and things where we could see the reunion, but it was really, really fascinating.
Thank you, Gordon.
So, yeah, a lot of people. I mean, it was amazing how many people came through town just to be able to shake Dad's hand and say, thank you.
I used to call that B-26 the Marauder, we used to call it Flying Cigar.
Oh,
And Flying Fox do it, I was in support, B-26
Oh.
Marauder. I was a wet maintenance supervisor, I was in charge of assembly transport in the South Pacific.
You heard what he said,
So I know what it is.
The Martin Marauder had a few names. One was One a Day in Tampa Bay, that's in training. The Widowmaker, and the last one was a Flying Prostitute. No visible means of support.
It's called a Flying Cigar.
And if we have time afterwards, I'll come back and tell a story about that. Okay, Sue,
About one a day in Tampa Bay, about that.
Heather, please, quick.
I'm Heather, daughter-in-law, married to Jeff, one of the youngest of the family. Had the opportunity to go to Italy, and for me, it was the trip of a lifetime. I can't even begin to tell you what it's like to be able to relive history like that with somebody along that was reliving it, in its immediacy as we went through these different areas, the towns. He showed us where the bombing run was. We went up the mountain, found the plane parts. And so for somebody, I was born in 1958, so I wasn't even around when World War II was going on. So to get a glimpse of the history, firsthand like this, and meet the people that he didn't realize were actually hoping to save his life when he, had been parachuted out of the plane. And to see those people, their faces, their reactions. The one man that met him, that was the shepherd, it was Giuseppe, to see him come into this little hotel shop and see him for the first time, and he thought he was dead his whole life. He thought he had been taken away by the Germans and he was dead. And to see him alive this many years later, just to see that reaction on these people's faces was a gift from God. It was amazing. So I can't even tell you how much of a wonderful trip it was.
Now, I'll just check one thing here. I was born in 1923. So, 41, I was a freshman at UNH. 42, we went into the service, as I read. And I was 21, September 1st, 44. I was shot down in November. So I was 21 and probably one of the younger people in the group. And, okay, now, Sue, please.
My most memorable moment was when we got to Mooseburg. We actually found, we were driving down the road trying to find the railroad tracks because he knew that the prison camp was near the railroad and he wanted to show us where the prison camp was. He wasn't sure what we were going to find, if we were going to find anything. And there was a woman with silver hair riding her bicycle to the grocery store. And he rolled down the window and flagged her down because he was sure she would know something. And of course she did. And with our broken German, and we had one nephew along who spoke Spanish and German and English, you can communicate anywhere. So we communicated to her and she said, this way, got on her bicycle, and we followed her in her van down the road, and she took us to a place, and they have converted many of the old barrack buildings into homes. They built on, and you could see the old shape of the block houses, but then there were elaborate homes built to them. And she said, wait a minute, and she went down the street to an auto dealership and made a phone call and called the local historian. And he was out there about that fast, and he took us to the last standing barrack building. It was untouched since World War II. It was falling in and dilapidated and covered with vines, but you could smell the evil in the air before you saw it, and there was just this overwhelming ick that you can't explain. It just, you knew something horrible had happened there, and it was before we saw it. And yet there were all these pretty little houses built in all of the other, it was the strangest, they call it Newtown. And it was clear that the people that lived nearby, they had been outside and they all went in and disappeared when they saw us coming. They knew the Americans were there and they just faded into the river. But this
Thank you,
fellow
Sue.
was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Paul, much longer do you?
Oh, you got all
Now,
that.
no, what I want to say is, they can come up and look at these things, and I can stay for quite a while.
Okay.
If, they can ask questions. If you want any major question before this happens, shoot, fire away, and I'll try to answer it, or if I can, I'll give my experts.
Len has a question here.
Would you please describe the B-26, number of engines, number of bombs, crew members?
The B-26?
Yeah.
All right, it's,
2,800.
it looks similar to the, similar to the C-47 or the DC-3. It's looks like a cigar. Well, you know what. Feels pretty comfortable. Would you pass one of those out? I think it's enough for everybody.
How many engines?
Two.
2 engines. First one to the top. All blades. It's a landing work. And one of they, they won't say, you know, because she landed so damn far. That's why they extend it. Wing. Increase the length of the wing.
I don't know if you can see this picture, but it looks That's a,
Thank you.
my grandson drew that. But, it's 2 engines, single tail, cigar shape, high, the wing sets up pretty well on the fuselage, and it's made by the Pratt company. It had, Pratt & Whitney engines, and those were much better, in my opinion, than the Wright engine that they had in the 17 and the 29 and the 25.
What was the name of the company that made it?
Martin.
Martin,
Martin.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
whatever.
well, the story goes that the boys were having, remember I said one a day in Tampa Bay?
One a day in Tampa, but you're right.
And the boys were very scared of it, and if it hadn't been for the Australians, it would never have been built, enough of them to be even worthy talking about. And so, this is a story that Doolittle came into the field. He was the head honcho of the whole operation. And he came in, got in the plane, took it off on a single engine. Got back in, flew away, never said another word, never said a word. And the boy said,
How many-
damn, if he can fly it, we can. And then there was a parallel story to that later on. You remember they had the wasps, the women who flew planes all over the country? Apparently the B-29 was a little tricky at one time. And they were having trouble with the fellows out in the Midwest at a field flying them. And somebody said, we'll fix that. They had the wasp bring in a whole group. No more complaining about the B-29.
If the women could do it.
Okay, any other questions?
Question over here.
Yeah,
Yeah, over here. Didn't they have a much higher landing speed, and that's why it was dangerous? It came in real hot, the Marauder.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
It had a really high landing speed. When you came in
Oh,
really
wait a minute,
fast.
yes, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, now, the original one, this is the one that got its bad name.
Yeah. Small
It
wings.
was, no, it was a little narrow wing, short wing.
Yeah.
They modified that up, when they got up to the G model, they modified that so that the angle of attack was about 3 degrees difference, and they'd extended the wings by 5 feet. And by then, it took off at about between 85 and 90. It would, you could feel it off the ground. And when I was in Barksdale in training, was one of the pilots had been an instructor pilot. He wanted to go overseas, and they wanted to go overseas. They kept telling him no, he couldn't go overseas. So he went down and signed out a B-26A was a model, the short wing one. And for 3/4 of an hour, he gave us an air show. He walked down and he said, well, my orders for Europe. And they sent him over. Yes.
What mission was shot down, how many missions have in?
What missions I shot down?
Now, how many missions have you flown?
I was somewhere around 25, 26, 27. And
That's good.
they were talking about sending us home at 30.
30? Yeah.
Then they were talking about it. Remember I said talking? Then it became 35. Then it became 40. Then it became 45. And they were not sending in replacement units. And so I understand it got up to 45 before, and very few people made it that way.
Is that because you had fire
There's one-
escorts?
Yeah, there's one thing, if there's any of those sheets left over, I'd like them back.
How many
Go on.
bombs?
Yeah, what
Do
do
you
you need?
remember why
bombs
that
were in the
cardboard
airplane?
is statistics on that?
What's that?
Do you know why that cardboard is statistics on
How many?
This one.
it? Read it.
I don't like glasses.
What were the statistics you were looking for? This said that there were 16 million in the service. Is that right?
Yep, 16 million, World War II,
130,200 POWs.
right.
90, and that was in World War II.
Yep,
94,000, I assume that's in the European theater?
Yeah,
And when Dad drove these stats down in 2014, there were about 12,000 veterans still living from World War II. Those are the statistics you had on this.
yeah. No, that's talking about the POW. That's
Right.
strictly just POW.
Right.
Nothing you must learn.
Any other questions? Then I'll turn it over to my kids again.
Right in front, Dad, right in front.
Jerry,
in front of you.
question. This,
Right there, Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry.
just
No,
ask.
Right here.
You got a question?
No,
Go ahead.
no,
Ron,
no, I didn't. I'm curious, and all the time I knew you, you never talked about any of your experiences, and from what I'm hearing, you never talked about it with the family much. What made you change your mind and start to do these presentations and whatever?
Well, number one, and I think you watch any of the wars, let's see, 1980, about 50, 60 years after the war's over, you begin to feel your life is going on the downhill.
Yeah.
And I think you owe it to future generations to document it. And if any of you are really interested, there's quite a few places that you can get a lot of information. One is the Library of Congress. They've got many, many, many veteran stories on VCR. And I don't know what, and you don't have to, as I understand it, you don't have to be related to anything. You can request it. The second thing is, the books just began to come out, if you remember correctly. And in 1979, my wife and I were fortunate enough to be able to go around the world. And on the way, on the final end of it, we did basically the same trip that we just completed now. I had one of the things that I saw that I was not involved with, except I was there, was some of the liberated people from DeKalb. DeKalb, as you know, was a political person, and I was in the, when I was liberated, when I was taken out of Mootburg, I was put in a field hospital. And that field hospital had probably half of the daily attendance was from people out of DeKalb. And we had about probably 20, 24 in that vicinity in the tent the first night. Those people were so dehydrated, were so undernourished that they could not even tolerate IVs. We lost about 10 of them that first night. And there's the best write-up that I've seen on the liberation of the DeKalb South is in a book called The Conqueror. And he has a whole section in there on liberating DeKalb. And you talk about skin and bone, you cannot imagine what these people were. And I've never outgrown that, and I never will. And I hope nobody else ever has to see anything like that. Any other question?
Mate, it's just walking on the hill that we're in those places. Himlock.
Huh?
It's Himlock in charge of Gestapo. It's just walking through and run those places.
And by the way, you know, let's see, who was there, was it Goebbels, was there,
Global Roman Club,
yeah?
Yeah.
And they poisoned their own kids.
that's right.
Yeah.
I just wanna say, Gerry, thank you for, your service, and on behalf of all of us, and for all that you endured,
And my entire swarm.
and you're our hero too.
Thank you very much, and I'll stay around, visit with anybody. How many people have seen one of these?